Okay. Hello and okay. Sorry, there's like a little bit of time delay. Well, hello and good morning, everyone, to everyone who joined this session. My name is Yusian, and I'm part of the sponsorship team, and I will be your host for this session. For those of you who came out in this session, I'm sure you'll have an upper hand in presenting your design in front of the judges tomorrow, so kudos to you. And now, without further ado, I'll welcome Riley to talk about how to nail your investor pitch.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Hey there, everyone. My name is Riley Moynes. I am the incubator manager at The Forge, which is a business incubator. I'm here today to talk about pitching. So I guess what I'll do here is I'll get my slides rolling, and I just want to let you guys know that if you have any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them in real time. If not, we can answer at the end. So here we go. All right. Oh yeah, I see. That's so I'm not gonna be. So maybe I will pause every so often here to flip back, just because the share screen, I can't see my my preview. So I'll flip back every once in a while and check for questions. Okay, anyway, so welcome everyone. Again, name's Riley, incubator manager at The Forge. The Forge, we're a startup incubator attached to McMaster University. We support companies. Vast majority are coming out of McMaster University, but we do have a number of startups that are coming out of anywhere. Could be anywhere. What I say is, if you're a grandma down the street trying to start a scalable, innovative startup company, we're here to help. We support entrepreneurship and innovation, not just on campus, but everywhere. We work with early entrepreneurs to scale businesses. When we talk about scalability, we're actually talking about if you're able to take your startup company and increase the revenue as it relates to the costs that you're incurring to do business, and kind of see that classic hockey stick graph. That's kind of the companies that we're looking to work with. We're not working with dentist offices. We're not working with your standard retail stores. We're working with companies that have some sort of differentiating factor and some intellectual property in the market, and have that ability to grow exponentially. One of the nice things about The Forge is we do not take any equity from the startups that we're working with, and the services that we provide are completely free. Just to kind of drop in here on the breakdown of the clients that we're working with, the vast majority of them fall under the digital media ICT banner. So that's software, hardware, tech, advanced manufacturing, that sort of thing. We also do, well, this is kind of an old breakdown here, but I would say that our medical device and diagnostics breakdown is actually more at about 25% now. And just to let you guys know that we're sector agnostic. So we're actually, we work with companies that exist in any sector. Yeah, a bit of an old slide here. I had to dig this presentation out of the library. Since 2015, we've worked with over 250 businesses. We've helped them raise over $40 million. And the companies that we've worked with are selling products in over 50 countries. We've created 500 jobs, and you might recognize a few of these logos here on the screen. We offer cohort-based programming. Actually, one thing I want to flag is that our startup survivor, this is an older slide, but we've kind of replaced our startup school and startup pitch student startup competition with a program called Startup Survivor, where we actually give out $75,000 over the course of the summer to students who are building businesses. you're actually able to receive cash as you go through the different challenges that we have, and then it kind of culminates in a pitch competition at the end. The other program that we have, which is kind of the pinnacle of what we have at the Forge, is what we call the business incubator, where we work very hands-on with our companies, one-to-one mentorship often, and we're providing as well co-working space for these guys. All right, I'm just going to take a second here to stop sharing and make sure there aren't any questions. Everybody's good. Okay. I'll just keep that share going here. All right. So let's talk about, oh, now it's working. Great. Let's talk about pitching. You know, if you think you haven't pitched before, you're probably wrong. Just about everybody on this call has pitched in one way or another, because essentially pitching is breaks down into some parts. The first part is you're trying to make people fall in love with a problem that you're solving. You're trying to quantify it, and then of course you have to get them to fall in love with your solution. And when you're trying to convince someone in an argument, or if you're in a debate or something like that, you're likely doing what you need to do, the common things that you would do in a pitch. So you've all pitched before, and so why learn the art of pitching? You have to, in this day and age, especially if you're doing something like trying to get a job, trying to get your boss convinced about something, and then of course what we're here to talk about today, but getting an investor convinced, you want to forward your agenda, right? And obviously that's not just because you're trying to get an investment. This is a life skill. The better you are at convincing people of something, a direction you want to go, the more successful you're going to be at the end of the day, especially in the business world. And so, I come from a film and video production background before I did my MBA, but I liken pitching to storytelling, because that's exactly what it is. And so, of course, I've got my Walt Disney Studios slide up here. These are the guys that have kind of perfected the method, right? And so, if we take a look at like a movie like Cinderella, you've probably seen this or a version of it. You've got the classic story arc here, and I don't know if you're familiar with this from a drama class or a theater class or something, but you've got the exposition, you've got the so in the case of Cinderella, that's her crummy life. She's got some terrible sisters, she's not living well, and so we start to go on this journey. So there's this moment, this incepting moment of hey, we need to, we're going to follow along on this journey now. Let's get into it. And then we've got the rising action. So there's a point in time where something happens, triggering the user to kind of get drawn more in, and you start to understand more of the problems that the lead character is dealing with. So in the case of Cinderella, that's getting invited to the ball, and how do we get there? And then we have this climax, this moment that that everything's been building towards, and in the case of Cinderella, that's where she dances with the prince, and there's this true love moment. But then there's a little bit more, something bad might go wrong, and so we've got this new motivation, right? How do we see that happy ever after? And in the case of Cinderella, we call that the following action. And then she gets the prince, everything's going to be okay. So there's the kind of the classic story arc. And now you're asking me, how does that relate to pitching an investor or pitching an idea? Well, when we talk about the rising action, what we're trying to do, and as it relates to pitching, this is where we talk about the problem and the evidence that we have. We're trying to size up the magnitude of this problem, especially, right? And convince the audience that it's something that needs to be solved. And so, this exposition and rising action, this building up. This is what we call sharing problem and evidence. So why is this a problem? Why does it need a solution? Okay, this is that convincing, the step of convincing that you have to go through. When we get to the climax, and this often, guys, this often happens early in an investor pitch, because you know you need to get your solution out there as soon as possible. Okay, but you do need to hook them with the problem first. So don't disregard that part, but you are going to get to the solution in an investor pitch fairly quickly. I've got an example I'm going to show you in a second here, but you do get to that solution pretty quickly, and it's theatrical, right? When you pull back the curtain, you say, here's what I've developed. You need to have people in your audience, the investors you're talking to, believing that this is the only solution to that problem that you were describing, and that it's protectable from a business strategy standpoint. And so this is where as we break it down, this is where you present your new idea, and it's unique and it's protectable. Okay. And then there's, in the case of Cinderella, you've got this falling action. There's this, perhaps a few other things that you have to sort out until you can live happily ever after. And in the case of an investor pitch, this is where we talk about your strategy or your plan to execute it. The kind of some of the more, not as exciting elements, like here's my financial projections, right? This is something that has to be or depends on the investor pitch, but in most cases you're going to include this, but it's not exactly the most exciting part. It's just it's something that you have to explain on the pathway to kind of living happily ever after, or getting the investor money you need to make this product a reality, or solution a reality. And then kind of the resolution moment is the ask, right? So, a lot of people will say, well, I don't really have an ask. Maybe I'm just pitching an idea to convince someone that they need to be on my team. Or maybe I'm just, it could be a pitch of any sort, but always there's going to be an ask. And so it's, what do you need to get things done? Perhaps in the case of someone pitching an idea to their boss, it's a give to get, like, here, let me help you with this. You give me the opportunity to get this done. In the case of an investment, this is the piece where you ask for some money and you say, in return, we're hoping to get you a 5 times return, or a 10 times, or, in the case of a unicorn, 100 times return on your investment. But it has to be clear what the next step is at the end of the pitch, right? You don't want to just leave it up in the air. All right. So the first part of, starting to craft a pitch is making sure that your value proposition is potent, it's aligned with the problem you're trying to solve, and that it's unique. Okay. So what does a good value proposition do? It addresses your customers' pain points. Okay. And I know that there's another session out here where we're talking about problem solving. This is the most important element of innovating or building a business. Okay. If you don't love the problem, if you don't understand it inside out, you're not going to be able to create a solution that people will find attractive. Okay. And there's a number of things that go along with that, like knowing your end user, and really having done validation with that end user to make sure that you understand that pain very well. A good value proposition solves a problem that the customer has, and it does that by going after their most potent pain point. One comment I have here is, people don't buy things because they are trying to solve a small problem. They're trying to, they're often, people take money out of their wallets because it's to solve a big problem, right? Like, I mean, if I broke my phone, all the other problems, the next day that I wake up, the biggest problem I had on my list will now be replaced by the fact that my phone is broken and I need to find a way to fix it, because these are things that tie us into society nowadays, right? And so when we make a choice as a consumer to pay money for something, it's because we're trying to solve a problem, and the most severe problem that we're having in that moment. So you're going to be interviewing your target market. If you don't know this potent pain point, and likely that's being explained in another workshop. And you could do that via unbiased customer interviews. I've got another workshop on that I can give you send to you if you're interested. Let me know after the session here. And so, what does a good value proposition include? Well, it addresses what it is. Okay, so what the product or service is, who it's for, and what are the values that you're delivering as the business offering the value proposition. So here's a value proposition for Google, and it's a bit broad, a little bit too broad, but when we're talking about startup companies, we want to be more focused. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is Google. So Google is the world's largest search engine. Okay, so there's the what it is. That automatically, there's a value there, provides because that's something that a consumer wants. They want ease of use. That provides advertisers. That's the who. And so this is a value proposition for advertisers, not necessarily everyone. Advertisers with potential customers tailored, there's another value to the ad content, increasing click-through rates and conversion rates. So those are, as you can see, this value proposition is directed at advertisers, and you can see the things that, the values that are solving some of those pain points for advertisers. So what are some of the pain points for an advertiser? Well, don't have a lot of time in one day, so I need something that just works. It's tailored, right? To the ad content that they're trying to deliver. Okay, so that means that I have to spend less time. Increasing click-through rates. This ultimately is the goal of an advertiser, right? And it references directly back to the revenue streams for the company that advertising company is working for. And then conversion rates also tie back to revenue, right? So there's a value proposition. I've got another one here. This one's for Lyft. And I've got it in a template that I really like to use. This is one that's commonly used amongst other incubators, accelerators, that sort of thing. So it's for, and then insert your target customer who have a problem. So insert their problem. And then the next line, the third line down, is your company's name and the description of the product. And then provides or helps, and then list the values of that value proposition. So for Lyft, it's for mobile phone users between the ages of 18 to 65. I know this is a fairly generalized kind of company with a broad spectrum user base, and that's why, but we're still trying to be specific. They're usually going to be mobile phone users, and they need to have a credit card. So these people are likely going to be 18 to 65. Who, and then we list their problem. They're in need of a ride, a safe ride, likely, inexpensive. Lyft, a mobile app, provides safe rides that are inexpensive and time effective. And actually, if you go to Lyft's website, you're going to see their value proposition, not in this exact format, but broken down. I actually have a screenshot of it. It says safe, inexpensive, time effective, essentially, on their website. So it's very important that you embody this value proposition. And here's an example of a quick example. Unfortunately, some of these made for TV or buy it on TV type advertisements do a pretty good job of of a pitch. So I'm just going to show you one here. This is for the perfect pancake. Let's play it.
Flip, but they flop. You flip, but they flop. Now your pancakes are a mess, and all that butter and fat to cook them. There's got to be a better way.
So I'm just pausing there for a second to show you. They've identified the problem for the target customer. And now we're going to get the value proposition. Here we go.
Hi, Mark Hill here for the perfect pancake pan. The fast, easy, spatula-free way.
Fast, easy, spatula-free. Okay. There's some of our values.
To make picture-perfect pancakes every time. Watch. Just pour in your favorite batter, close the handle, and flip it. Presto!
What we call this part is the secret sauce. So now they're going to tell us, how they accomplish that value proposition, right? We've designed something incredible. Here are the features of it. This is where we talk about features. Okay, you don't want to talk about your features when you're talking about your value proposition, right? You want to show how you're solving the customer's problem. But you leave the feature set until later.
Or golden brown pancakes with no mess and no added fat. The reason is this double-sided non-stick surface that's so slippery, not even burnt-on cheese will stick to it. Flip delicious blueberry.
All right, you get the idea. I don't have to show you the rest of this, but ultimately there's going to be an ask, and it's, hey, for $24.99. If you pay now, you're going to be able to get one of these things, and so that's where we get to the ask. Pretty straightforward. You're probably going, Riley just showed us a crappy pancake flipper commercial from 1995, but at the end of the day, the structure remains the same. You still see that type of ad on TV. You still see that structure in all types of pitches, including, investor pitches. And the reason that this method is still around is because it works. Okay. So what are the rules of pitching? Ultimately, you want to get your audience to say yes and support your idea or your ask. Okay. Ultimately, there's no rules, right? You might see examples of crazy pitches where people do incredible reveals of products. They make it theatrical, right? Ultimately, while that might be kitschy or weird or whatever, something that helps your idea stand out, engages the audience. If you think you've got that the capability to do something like that, do it, right? The better people get engaged, the more you wake them up, especially an investor. An investor is probably sitting there going through hundreds of these pitches in a week. If you can wake them up with some sort of theatrics, all the power to you, right? Ultimately the goal is just to get them to say yes. So when you're pitching, and this is something that I come across regularly when I'm meeting with engineers, doctors, scientists, especially, and anyone that kind of falls in that category, there's oftentimes they kind of go towards a more sciencey way of delivering this material, and ultimately the people that are making, especially if you're pitching an investor, the people that are making these decisions of whether that you get money and you get to continue to commercialize your product or service, they probably don't have that background knowledge that is necessary. So you're going to have to simplify things. You're going to have to use metaphors, examples, comparisons, analogs in order to get your topic, your idea across, right? Especially if it's very technical. Also, you need to resist that want to, to basically flaunt some of your scientific accomplishments, right? Because that's not going to win you over in the eyes of an investor, right? The investor is worried about the business case, the size of the problem, whether or not this thing is protectable and whether or not they can make crap loads of money on it. Okay. If you could convince them of that while also getting across some of those technical elements, go for it. But if you lose them in the tech and the science, then that's a problem. Okay. If they stop listening, you've got a problem. The other thing that you want to make sure you're doing with a pitch is you want to quantify the size of the problem. You want to show that you've done research and that there's people that will buy this. Okay. So ultimately, if I've built something and I want to sell it, I need to go out to the market before I talk to an investor and say, hey, market, will you buy this thing? And there's a number of ways to do this. We call this prototyping. We call this trying to get early market validation. A method of doing this is on what's called Kickstarter. And likely you've heard of Kickstarter, but it's here's my MVP, put it out there, see if, include some benefits that that anyone supporting your project can attain, and then see who's going to give you money. Anybody who's giving you money for a prototype, that's what we call validation. And there's like a different kind of range of the importance of these validating items, like even sharing an idea on, your social media and getting likes and shares, that's a form of validation. But ultimately what we want to get to is when someone takes money out of their pocket and gives it to us, right? That's the hardest thing to get a consumer to do. And one other rule that you should not forget is don't forget an ask, right? If your pitch ends even, talking to your boss, talking to, a coworker, whatever, and you forget to ask them for something, then what was the point of pitching them and trying to get them convinced of that your idea is one that needs to be solved? So always make sure you have that. All right. And so, here's the basic building blocks of a pitch, guys. Okay. Problem and solution. So we've got the inciting incident, the rising action. That's the problem. The solution is the climax. So remember how I said we're going to get to the climax of this pitch fairly early in the overall length of the pitch. And then we've got a market size. So we say, here's the size of the problem. This is why you should care, right? And then there's the business elements. So how are we going to sell this thing? How much are we going to sell it for? What kind of channels are we going to use in selling it? And then the ask. So that's kind of the basic building blocks of the pitch. You research pitching online, you're going to see it's very much like this. And so, obviously, you don't want to forget an intro slide. The reason I'm actually starting with this, though, is because we're going to look at a case study. And this is actually Airbnb's pitch deck. And in fact, you can find a lot of pitch decks online for companies you would know regularly now. But yeah, and a lot of these aren't very good, from a graphical sense, and even if we were to look at some of these and go, oh, this is a great pitch, a lot of them aren't great. But the fact of the matter is that the structure is there. It's up to you as the innovator and entrepreneur to make them look pretty and make them theatrical and keep audiences engaged. But remember that the structure is fairly similar. So let's break down kind of some of these building blocks a little bit more. When we talk about the problem, right? You can describe the problem describes a real world need, and it's focused. Okay, it's focused to a group of people, likely. Okay, you don't want it to be broad. If you're trying to do what we call boiling the ocean, then you're never going to be successful, because a startup company only has a certain amount of funds and a certain amount of marketing dollars that they can burn through in pursuit of revenue. And so if you start by saying, my product solves this big problem for everyone, then you're going to run out of money by the time you get to actual success, actual what we call product market fit, where your product is selling itself essentially. So you want to be focused, right? And when we describe our problem to the people listening to our pitch, it's a 2 to 3 sentence description of the problem to catch attention, right? Remember the pancake video, right? And you can even use a fact, right? Like 25% of the world's shoes are not created properly, and here's why, right? That would grab some attention likely. And also is a pretty crappy example, but also it's going to introduce the pain points. So what are they? And often these for a consumer side can be related to an emotion, or it could be related to functional things like something takes too long to do. It's inconvenient. It costs me a lot of money. Those are characteristics. Those pain points are crossover from B2C, so business to consumer products, and as well as B2B. Anything on the business side, if you're selling to a business, they're going to be ultimately everything is going to boil down to the bottom line, right? Oh, it takes too long to do this thing. Well, what does that mean for a business? It means that they're going to have to spend more money on labor. They have to take those assets and put them towards something, likely taking away those assets from something else. Well, that's costing money, right? So keep that in mind. And then you're going to share some trends. I would probably, this is probably something you're going to use more when you're talking about the size of the problem, which you don't need to get completely out in this first problem slide. You can actually retain it for when you start to talk about the size of the market and the size, then you can talk about how the market for that particular type of product is growing. But that's just one thing that I like to do. You can include those little elements in the problem statement if you want. All right, so for Airbnb, what does that look like? So this is their actual slide. The problem is the price is an important concern for customers booking travel online. Hotels leave you disconnected from the city and its culture, and there's no easy way exists to book a room with a local or become a host. That was their slide. A little bit broad, I think, and it doesn't really touch on necessarily doesn't really delineate between the end user, so the person booking a room, and the person hosting a room. It does a little bit, but ultimately it's straightforward, right? Not that many words on this slide. Very important. All right, once we've got that problem out, we talk about the solution and the benefits, right? And so, we've talked about our value proposition. I've kind of given you that format that I like to use. Keep it simple, right? So you can also, one other tactic that you can use is to demonstrate the experience of a customer using the using the product. You could give, a real story, like, Susie, after she took on our product, here's how her life changed, or here's how the rest of her day got better. You could do that if you want, not required, but you could try. One of the things a tactic that people like to use is to try to paint a picture of an ideal world. So imagine a world when you can get get from point A to B in a safe, comfortable environment easily and cheaply. Introducing, and then this is what we call the moment of pulling back the curtain. And also when we talk about the story arc example that I gave you earlier, this is the climax, right? Where you reveal the big product. So introducing insert name of product, and then you talk about the values and the benefits, right? That's one way to explain your solution. And then one of the other things that, as you're explaining those values and benefits that I previously explained, like it's cheaper and it makes things more comfortable and safer. You have to make a case for why now, right? The timing is important, right? And so, because right now, everybody, the trend is such that people want to buy this color shoes or whatever, right? You can reference your trend here. That's kind of the building block of the solution. And so when we look at, Airbnb, they keep it pretty simple, which is great. And also kind of they go with this kind of bold method. A web platform where users can rent out what is Airbnb? A web platform where users can rent out their space to host travelers to save money, make money, and share culture. So they're kind of bringing together the value propositions for both the end user and the renter. After all, Airbnb is a two-sided marketplace, so they have two value propositions for two different kind of end users here: the renter and the person renting, or sorry, person renting their property and the rentee. They've kind of broken down that value proposition here into these three building blocks, and it's very bold and it gets to the point. And then what they do is, this is where we call the secret sauce, okay? They start to tell us, well, here's what we've developed and here are the features of it, right? In this case, what they did was they created their product as a mock-up. This was actually not a working product when they were pitching it. They just had some Photoshop designs of what their interface would look like, and here's how it works. You can search by the city. You get to review listings of locals who are ready to rent their properties, and it's as simple as clicking book it, right? That kind of gets into the minutia of how they accomplish the value proposition. So that, if we kind of zoom out and look at the whole of the pitch, that's where we get the secret sauce. And then we talk about the market, right? This is the building block that comes after we get to the climax. You've got your problem and your solution out of the way. So now help me understand that there's people out there that want to buy this, and there's a lot of people, and that a group of people, the size of that group is growing. And this is essentially, if you're talking to an investor, this is where we say this is a big market. Okay, you definitely want to invest your money here because you're going to get a big return on investment. All right, so we describe your target customers. You can talk about their age, their income bracket, their lifestyle, right? And then how do they all kind of fit together? We usually how do they fit together in terms of size, right? So it's how many of these people exist in North America? So there's, for people trying to wear red shoes, there's 3 million people. And we know that because of X research, right? You have to quantify the market. And there's I'm not going to get into it here, but there's a methodology for building your market sizing, which looks at what we call the total addressable market, the sustainable observable market, and then the share of the market. And ultimately, an investor wants to know all of those things. I'm not going to define it here for you. I'll let you kind of do that research down the line. But you have to know, if we were to do extremely well and expand our operations, there would be this many people we could potentially see as customers. That's the total addressable market. The share of market is what you can realistically hit in your first 1 to 2 years of operations, right? Those are the people that we can see converting to using our product and paying us. And so, you need to make it clear for the investor that there's a lot of people here that will buy now, but there's also a market that we can grow into, right? And when we're talking about these things, we want to quantify. We want to use real numbers, you know, and you can also talk a little bit about any kind of traction you've had so far. Like we launched our product. We're the Red Shoe Company. We launched a product. We had, you know, 600 plus orders in the first week, and you know, we only marketed to maybe 2,000 people. What a great return on our marketing investment, right? This is this is what it looks like when we kind of get into real life. This is for Airbnb. They call it their market size slide. This is very standard, and these kind of nesting dolls of you know, market size. This is where that TAM, SAM, SOM comes into play. So in the case of Airbnb, you've got 2 billion plus people who have booked trips worldwide. Okay. And this is a very old number. It's probably a lot more than that. And that's what we call the total available market. If we grew exponentially over the course of 5 years, we could potentially be hitting 2 billion people. And then it kind of goes down and down to 84 million. And that is what they consider to be their share of the market. In the first year or two, we think that we can grab 84 million people or trips booked, and they'll offer a reason why. It's important to offer a reason why you think you can get that many people to book with you. And then the next thing is we want to talk about our business. How are you going to approach selling this thing? How much? What's our go-to-market strategy? These are maybe go-to-market strategy is a new term for you, and I'll explain it. But it's how are we taking this to market, right? We are going to sell this product for X dollars, and we're going to sell it in these types of stores, or we're going to sell it online. This is how much money we expect to make on every unit we sell, right? That's where we kind of talk about the revenue model. When we talk about go-to-market strategy, this is essentially the actions you're going to take to go from a product, you know, a product you have sitting in your warehouse to your first 10,000 customers, your first 20,000 customers, right? In fact, when I talk to my clients about this, I say, I want to know how you're going to hit the first 1,000, the first 100, the first 1,000, and the first 10,000 customers, because the strategy that you use might be different. And, you know, I could give you an example of a go-to-market strategy that's been used in the, that was used by, well, Uber. Okay. So, you know, they've got an interesting business, because in order for them to service their target market, people in need of rides, desperately in need of rides, they have to have drivers to service them. And if you don't worry about both sides of this marketplace, like if you don't have enough drivers, then your value prop is you cannot make money on your value proposition, essentially, right? So, you know, they had a unique problem, and other people who have a two-sided marketplace have this problem as well. You need both to stimulate the supply side and the demand side. What they did was they said, well, where are our end users having this problem, the problem of needing safe, inexpensive, you know, on-time rides? Where are they having this problem the deepest? What is that most deepest pain point? In fact, where is that? What is the event that we can isolate where this pain point is the deepest? And if you think about it, you know, how about like the Super Bowl? How about like a World Series baseball game? How about a Kanye West concert, right? When you exit one of these events, it's incredibly hard to get transportation. You're willing to spend tons of money just to get get away from the arena or wherever this event is being held. Often you had some drinks, you know, and you want to make sure you've got a safe ride. So what they did was they set up posters around, you know, these types of events in big cities, and they said, "Hey, you know, it's going to be tough for you to get a ride. Why not try Uber? And here's the website and a promo code." And what they did to stimulate the other side of the market, so the supply side with the drivers, they said, "Hey, drivers, we're going to hire all of these black cabs, you know, those really nice cabs, and we're going to pay you good money to come and pick people up. And we're going to sequester all of your cabs." And from the black cab owner's perspective, the company that owns all of those cabs, they, you know, it's good for them, right? Oh, you mean we don't have to take calls all night and try to arrange all these rides. You know, you're going to do that for us. Okay, great. And you're going to pay us well, even better. So that's what they did. They stimulated demand by going to the place where the pain point was the deepest, and then they stimulated supply through looking at some of the pain points for the operators of these cab companies. And poof, ultimately what they did was their model began to work, right, organically. And that would be an example in a long-winded way of a great go-to-market strategy. So how are you going to get those customers, and then how are you going to keep them, and how are you going to add more customers from your first 100, your first 1,000, your first 10,000? And then, so I kind of explained revenue model already, but it's how are we going to make money? How much? What's our how much do we take away at the end of the day? And then some milestones, and this is in what we call commercialization. So, you know, what do we need to do next? What do we need to do in the first month? What do we need to do in the first 3 months? What do we need to do in the first year in order to get into the market and start stimulating more growth from the product side? And then, you know, ultimately this also include, you know, an investor is going to be trying to invest in a team, right? So, you know, and people will say, like, you know, you need to have a good idea, you need to have a great problem you're trying to solve, but, you know, kind of the second most important thing to an investor is going to be the team behind it, right? Do you have the experience? Do you have a good differentiation of team members? Like, can someone take care of the business? Is someone taking care of the product, like from a tech perspective and a design perspective? Do you have great advisors? Like, are there people on your team who have, or that you can access, that have scaled businesses before, right? This is where it's your opportunity to talk about that. So for Airbnb, what they did was they talked about their adoption strategy. Okay. Oh, how are we going to do it? We're going to go to events. Why? Because events are where, you know, their target market is having the deepest pain point. They're going to try to, you know, create some partnerships with some of these, you know, trip booking companies. And then their initial go-to-market strategy was they're going to reach to stimulate the supply side. Was, we're going to go to Craigslist. We're going to scrape down Craigslist. We're going to figure out who, you know, who's trying to rent their property for short-term purposes. And then we're going to just build them a page on Airbnb. And we're going to see what happens. Essentially, what they're doing is marketing the product for that, for the renter, which is a huge benefit. You know, at the end of the day, the renter is just trying to make money. And so that's a great way to get some of these users to list their properties and to stimulate the supply side. So this is an okay adoption strategy. Obviously, they're not couching it in terms of, you know, how long each one of these things is going to take and at what point are they activating each part of the plan. But and that would be nice to have. But again, you know, straightforward. Keep it simple. And then there's the ask, right? So, you know, if your pitch is to a manager, you know, and if you're calling yourself an entrepreneur, or you're, you know, trying to move up the corporate ladder, the ask might look like you asking for permission and resources to proceed with a project, right? And now that you've heard my pitch, here's what I need to get it done, right? If you're asking for a raise or promotion, make sure that you get that ask out and there's some sort of value associated with it. And then when it comes to an investor, it's always some percent of the company for a dollar amount, right? Ask for a specific cash investments, explain what you're going to put the money towards. Ultimately, that investor needs to know that there's going to be return on the investment. So you kind of need to give them a timeline, whether you cover this in this slide or you cover it in, your timeline slide. It's up to you, but you need to explain when they might be expecting a return on their investment. And then you can get into your financials. This is by no means a detailed financial overview for Airbnb, but what they're trying to, ingratiate here is, we need $500,000. And then what we're hoping that $500,000 is going to be able to do is quadruple to $2 million through booking 80 trips at $25 average fee. It's pretty clear here what the investor might see as a return on their investment, a 4x return. Not bad. Some other things to keep in mind. Will delivering the correct content in logical order guarantee success? The answer is no. Great speakers have influence over their audience. They need to, acquire the respect of the audience as they go through the pitch. You have to try to be charismatic. If you need to use, other methods, use theater, be theatrical. Can you tell a story well? At the end of the day, you need to be able to tell the story of the end user very well, because the story of the end user, the investor is going to try to see themselves in the shoes of that end user. And if they can, then they'll say, okay, well, listen, I believe this is a problem, and it sounds like you've got a really great solution, so here's my money. Yeah, I'm not really sure what I was trying to say with that slide, but so you have to also establish a credibility, okay? When we talk about our team, it's expertise. I kind of gone over that already, but also clarity. You have to be clear, concise, limited text on unlike this presentation, make sure you have limited text on your slides. You're talking to them, you want them to listen. If they're not listening to you and they're trying to get the message from your slides, then you're going to lose them, okay? You want to be, what's coming out of your mouth is what you need them to really be latching onto. The slides are just to support your argument, okay? You don't want to be relatable, right? So if you're talking, you're the CEO, you need to imbue that you are, you deeply need to solve this problem, and that you're the right person to do it. And that you're willing to take direction, you're willing to take input, because I can tell you right now, an investor is going to want to do that. Connect with your audience, by providing examples, providing examples of traction. Remember when I was talking about scientists trying to pitch ideas? You don't want to get overly technical. Use analogies if you need to. Quantify that size of that problem. Kind of just repeating a few things that I've said here already. When it comes to the data, you have to have real numbers. If it's research that you're presenting, you need to have references on that research. Demonstrate that you've measured something. If you aren't able to measure anything, or you haven't done the research, it's going to come out in this presentation. If you have sold something already, or you've convinced someone to buy your thing already, make sure you're telling that story, right? Any kind of successful customer experience that you've been able to get across is going to show to the investor that you've got some sort of validation in the market around this. Make your story relatable. Use emotion, right? Tell the story of the person having the problem through the eyes of someone who actually had the problem. Give them a name, right? Talk about their experience. And then what else here? I've talked about illustrating your problem with analogies. And then, obviously know the material. They're going to be asking you questions at the end of this thing. And so you're going to want to know the industry well. You're going to want to know your end users well. And you're going to want to know the tech well. If you need to, bring your experienced tech person along with you, to help you answer some of these questions at the end of the pitch. Let's see what else here. Oh, there's a great resource, Guy Kawasaki. He's an investor, Silicon Valley guy. He came up with this thing called the 10-20-30 rule. You can find his blogs online, of course. So the 10-20-30 rule is 10 slides, 20 minutes max. Okay, this is for even a more complex business. Don't go over 20 minutes. Use big font. Reduce the amount of words on the screen. Use pictures and diagrams as much as you can to support what you're saying. He's got a number of other lessons that you can get if you look Guy Kawasaki up. I know this might sound kind of cliche, but watch Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. If you break down the format, it's going to be the same way that, from pitch to pitch. They do theatrics pretty well on that show, and for a number of reasons, but number one being that it's a TV show. It needs to be entertaining. You'll be able to get a lot of ideas on how to pitch properly from that show, even though it's a little bit cliche, and there's often a lot of terrible ideas. But you'll see that the structure and the theatrics are something that you need to pay attention to. A few more tips. Pay attention to their body language. Are they getting bored? Are you saying too much? Are you off topic? You'll be able to get that from looking at your audience. Prepare for your Q&A. I kind of previously, so one way to do that is to go to other people who have either raised money or investors or, mentors that you have and say to them, hey, listen, can you check out my pitch? I'm going to do it for you. Ask me some questions that come to mind at the end of the pitch, right? Did my business model make sense? Do you need me to elaborate on it? What didn't, ask questions around the business and make sure that the person presenting is able to then answer those questions. And one other really important thing to do, you're probably going to have a ton of information that if you're paying attention to Guy Kawasaki, you're not going to be able to fit into 10 slides. And don't even try, because obviously try to keep the words as limited as possible. But what you can do is you can have an appendix, right? So if somebody asks, if you're going to talk about the minutia of your financial model, you can say, well, hold on. Someone says, hey, show me your financials. You can say, well, give me a sec, flip to your appendix, and then, that's where you keep your financial slides. Try to predict what it is they're going to ask you for, and then put that slide in the appendix. That shows forethought and your strategic mind right then and there. And you'll definitely ingratiate yourself to the people watching. Practice, practice, practice. I know, very cliche, but say it out loud, say it in front of people, get your friends to watch, get your family to watch. Know the story, but also do not memorize. Okay, if you memorize this stuff and something throws you, a car honks its horn outside, you're gonna get thrown off. You might forget your script, and now you're standing there with nothing else to say. So do not try to memorize. Okay, that's it. I know we're hitting an hour. I think I was scheduled for an hour and a half, but who's got questions? Does anybody have any questions that I can answer? I can, you can throw them in the chat here.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm not seeing any questions, but I certainly have some questions because I was taking notes, and it's very, yeah. Well, I just want to say I really like the perfect pancake example. I think I'm gonna have it for lunch. It was really it was a great example.
It's cheesy. It's cheesy, but it's honestly,
yeah.
honestly, if you think back to all the other times you've seen something pitched, you go, oh, it's the same format, you know. So
yeah.
that's why it's a great example.
Certainly. So I guess to start off with, so in terms of like the judging that's coming up, people only had like maybe 1.5 day to kind of design their thing and come up with the pitch and say, like, think about what they're gonna talk about. So I'm thinking that it's gonna get you more nervous than if you had like a week to like prepare for a presentation. So what are some things that you can maybe do or maybe you've done to like calm your nerves before something like this?
Good question. And one thing I'll address, just because I know that you guys are going to be building out a pitch for the judging. And what are the judges like? What are they expecting from you? Just to present a solution, or is there more kind of business aspect that kind of goes with it?
I haven't really thoroughly looked at the judging package, but
Okay.
from what I can remember, it's they have to consider the marketing portion of it as well as present their design solution at the same time. Yeah.
So here's what I'm going to suggest for you guys, because this isn't exactly an investor pitch. You're not going to have the time to go into detail about the business, the revenue model, you know, your business business model, all of that. So, you know, if that's the case, right, it's present a very strong problem, have evidence, make sure it's specific. You're not boiling the ocean. Okay. So present that problem. Big reveal on the solution. Remember, you know, theatrics. Let me introduce you to this amazing product. Here's how it's differentiated. Here's how it's different than other ideas that are out there. And then here's how it works, right? You'll have time to do those things. And then when it comes to marketing, this is where we talk about go-to-market strategy, right? So how do we get, and back to the kind of, I talked about that Uber example of, you know, here's how they got their first 100, their first 1,000, first 10,000 customers. Think, if you think in terms of how do you get your first 100,000, 10,000 customers, that marketing portion is it's gonna come right out. It's gonna be great. Okay, so you know, you might have an ask at the end. I don't exactly know what it's going to be in this case, but you know, pick us because, you know, X, right? And so that's how I would structure your pitch for this particular contest. What I would do to reduce nerves, I think, is try to get in front of as many people as you can that you respect, who are perhaps have business knowledge, or have worked in startup companies, that sort of thing, and try to just present your presentation for them, get feedback, right? Again, one of the things that you're going to want to do is make sure that you're getting this material out there in a fluid, personable way. You're telling stories off the top of your head. You don't have to be perfect. As you can see through listening to this presentation, that, you know, I'm not perfect, right? I'm not reading off a script. I'm able to ad lib a little bit. I give kind of some crappy examples, but ultimately I think the point comes across. So as long as you are able to be comfortable with the material, then that's going to make your nerves reduce. It does for me anyway. And it, like, being confident with the material is always kind of going to be the best thing for you, right? So that's how I would reduce my nerves if I were in the situation.
Yeah, That does sound like a good strategy,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I think that also comes with like a lot of practice as well, like doing the
A lot of
presentation.
practice.
Yeah.
A lot of practice. Again, though, it's not about memorizing, right? It's about just being able to ad lib, coming out there and knowing the material. Okay, it
Right.
looks like we have a question here.
Yes.
A couple of questions. How big of an initial sample size is necessary to prove there is a need or demand for your idea? Very good question. I have a lot of people that ask me this question. There isn't really like a number. Okay, when I say, and as a designer, you're going to come across this, but essentially, there is if you're building product, if you're building things and trying to sell them, the research cycle never ends. Okay, so you need to be constantly talking to your end user. To if I'm going to put a number on it, I would say it's probably 20 to 30 people that you want to do qualitative research with. Okay, that means asking people like, tell me about the last time you had a problem, right? Making sure that you're not biasing yourself when you're asking them to explain this to you by saying, hey, that problem, tell me a little bit about it, because what you just did there was you biased them. You said to them, this is a problem you should care about. You need them to come out and tell you what that problem is. You want to pull that out of them. And so you need to get 20 to 30 people to tell you that they're having a problem for you to be confident that it exists. And also what you need to do is you need to profile that market. Make sure you're talking to people, validating the problem across a group of people that have similar characteristics. Because if you don't work with people across these, that have these similar characteristics, you're going to find yourself burning through all of your marketing dollars, right? The way that we market, we go on Facebook, we take out some ads and we say, we want to target, middle school teachers who are women who have upper middle class status, right? That group of people is going to, it's going to cost you a whole lot less than trying to market to every high school teacher out there, right? If you try to do that, you're going to burn through all your marketing spend. So you need to be very specific, and you need to have like 20 to 30 people. But listen, I mean, if you were to go at the Forge, we're a little nicer. We don't make people do a ton of customer discovery. This is what we call this process, going out and doing interviews and stuff. If you go to an incubator like Velocity, which is in Waterloo, linked with the University of Waterloo, actually for the first month after you're accepted, you have to do 50 customer interviews per week for the first month. And if you don't, they'll kick you out. Simple as that, right? Because what that proves to them is that you haven't been able, if it's that hard, and if you're not motivated to go out and talk to those people you're just asking for a conversation, you're not even trying to sell to them. If you can't do that, then just try selling. It's so hard to get people to give you their money. What you're doing is you're just asking someone to have a friendly conversation, right? And so that's why it's tough for me to put a number on it. But qualitative research, 20 to 30 people, you can feel good about moving forward with that kind of number there. And then I see Alice has a question. Thanks for the talk. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, to present to the judges, what should we put in the slides to attract the judges' attention? Secondly, ad-libbing has always been something I strive to achieve, but sometimes I lose my train of thought. What can I do to recover from messing up? Oh, very interesting. So let's tackle this first question. Firstly, to present to the judges, what should we put in these slides to attract the judges' attention? Okay, so when it comes to, we have to kind of break this down into the segments of the pitch. And for you, you're going to be defining a problem. Okay, so a big, bold statement about a problem that the judges, that you might have some, maybe an example of a real life person having that problem, right? Put that on the screen. Like, let me introduce you to, whoever, Parker or Alice, right? Let me introduce you to them. here's their problem that they're having, and here is the emotional effect, or here is the financial effect, right? When you can get your judge to kind of have this emotional connection with the person, whether real or fake, that is supposedly having this problem you're about to solve, then you're going on the right direction. Okay. When it comes to your solution, what are some of the things to put on the screen? Show them that you've done some work, right? You're going to want a very big, bold, simplified value proposition statement that's focused and is differentiated. So if they go, oh, that solution, yeah, I've heard of that one before, that's probably not going to benefit you. Okay. So make sure that it's something that's completely different and it solves the problem really well, but it's specific. And then you can bring back in that story of perhaps this person, this vehicle you're using to tell the story, right? So if it's Parker or Alice's problem, here's the problem, let me introduce you to the solution. Okay, here's the value proposition statement, and now tell me how that made the life of Parker or Alice better, right? I think trying to tie your problem and solution to a real life example of a person who has feelings, who's got emotions, etc., that's going to be in your benefit. Okay. And it's going to make it more relatable for the judges. When it comes to your, talking about how you're going to market this thing or your go to market strategy, think outside the box, use some a way of quantifying, right? Saying, and be realistic. Like with our first step to get to our first 100 customers, we're going to put out 10 Facebook ads and we're going to put them into these segments. And just based on our research, we think that we're going to see a return of about 30% of these people, which will equal this much revenue, right? Quantify. I mean, I know that you're probably not going to get there with this hackathon, but quantify that, big numbers, things that show that there's some sort of increase in the revenue or the benefit that your company is getting. Hopefully that's answering your question. So secondly, ad-libbing has always been something I strive to achieve, but sometimes I lose my train of thought. Right. What can you do to recover? And this is where, I often say don't use your slides necessarily as a crutch, but you can, right? I think for me, and I'm not super comfortable talking in front of people. I don't know if you've noticed that, but one of the things that I like to do is, you could say, okay, and wrap up that slide and go to the next one where you can start kind of at the beginning of your talking points, right? But you can also have some talking points. It's at least to get started. When it comes to you're gonna eventually want to be able to talk about this stuff kind of at the back of your head, right? It just honestly, Alice, it comes with practice, right? At the end of the day, the more like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to teach each other things in study sessions. I know that was always something that really helped me be able to talk off the cuff about something, right? So if you're, maybe trying to convey a message, it's let me try to teach this to someone, right? And I know that kind of sounds like practicing your pitch, but ultimately, that the more you talk about it, the more you try to teach someone, the more you try to convince someone that your idea is the right one, the better you're going to get at ad-libbing at the end of the day. Any other questions?
I have some, but yeah, I was gonna ask Alice's second question too, because that's something I've also wanted to do, but like also struggled with a lot.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like help me understand more like about your problem then. Like how do you get and how do you currently get around this or try to?
In terms of ad-libbing,
Mm-hmm.
well, most of the time I'll start off with like making a script, maybe about like what I want to say, like maybe a
Okay.
bullet points for each slide, like what I want to get across. In
Yep.
terms of like ad-libbing, I like mostly like think about, oh, where can I add some humor to like engage the audience? But then sometimes I lose like my train of thought while I'm speaking and kind of lose how I can connect the jots, like dot jets that I put down for the script.
Right.
That's how I would usually like lose my train of thought.
So here's the thing, okay? And I really encourage you guys to stay away from a script completely, okay? Force yourself while you're practicing to only work off of limited bullet points. If you're working off limited bullet points, that's going to force you. It's almost like a script is almost like a crutch, right? You're gonna try to lean on it, and I've done it. I've been there with you guys. But if you can go to bullet points, and you've got them, on a sticky note or something like that, you can keep that in your hand. It's not super evident when you're referencing, and I'm looking down right now, and it's, oh yeah, okay. Let me talk about that for a second, right? But what you're doing is when you're practicing with bullet points, you're forcing yourself. You're almost inserting a script into your brain, right? Rather than having it on a piece of paper. So that's why I always say, try your best to not write a script. If you do, it's going to become a crutch, and in the moment of anxiety while you're going through this pitch, you're gonna try to lean on it. And I've done that. I've had a script and I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot where I was going with this. Like, I'm just gonna read, and
Yeah.
so you divert to what is the easiest, and that's where you can lose the audience, right?
Yeah, certainly. So kind of like going off of that question, for your influence slides, you talk about how you articulate your pitch is also very important in like engaging and
Yep.
getting your point across. What are your thoughts on maybe like hiring someone or getting that one person who's like really good at talking to
Mm,
like do the presentation for you?
mm,
Because
interesting.
yeah, if you're not you're not good at this, and like you have no idea how to improve on it, but you're kind of on the like edge of time, like you don't have time to like improve on it yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's the thing, right? There's an opportunity always for your audience to ask questions down the road, right? And if you bring in a hired gun to do your presentation, and they haven't been around for the development of the idea, talking to the end users, that sort of thing, then they might start to fall flat in the question and answer portion, right? But what we always tell our startup companies is, when it comes to presenting to investors, you're going to want the person with the most moxie, the best ability to tell a story, the best off the cuff person to do that and the most comfortable, public speaker to do that presentation. There's been times I know a number of our companies actually at the Forge who have done this, but it's the CEO that isn't necessarily the person pitching, right? You can bring in another person from your team, but keep it to your team, right? If it's some hired gun, like a friend of yours who wasn't even part of the hackathon or wasn't even part of your startup, and you try to bring them in, they're gonna have a problem when it comes to the question and answer period, right? But yeah, definitely, like, the person who's leading the team, who's best at operations, who's maybe got the best strategic mind, doesn't necessarily have to be the person who's pitching. For sure not.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I like most of the time, like if we're presenting in a team, we would try to like divide it equally so that
Uh-huh.
like
It looks like
to
everybody
show,
did work,
yeah,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and
that's
that's
just a
that's
question I had. Yeah.
that's the way it happens. That's the way it happens, when you're in school often, right? Because
Yes.
you want to make it clear that everybody on the team participated, because everybody is going to be getting an individual mark, right? When it comes to a business scenario, right? Your investors don't care about anybody's individual effort. They care about, is this company with their amazing, do they have a potent problem that they're trying to solve? Do a lot of people have it? Is there a value proposition there? And is this the right team and strategy to execute it. And I don't care. I don't care who it is on the team that's doing it, as long as it gets done, right? And so that's why it doesn't matter when it comes to that team. But what there's other ways to do this when you're working on in a student team, right? You could convey that to the professor ahead of time, or teacher ahead of time. You can say, listen, do we all need to pitch? Is that part of our individual mark? If it's not, we're going to give one person the job of pitching, and we're going to assign other people tasks that are more in line with their skill set. And that's how we'd like to be graded, right? So you can negotiate with your professors in that sort of situation, right? So keep in mind that, there are some norms there when it comes to education, but norms are always meant to be kind of broken and innovated on, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
So Alice has got a question here. Might be a little off topic, but you mentioned a lot about pitching a product service. But what are some of the tips to pitch yourself to others? Ooh. Yeah. Okay. So, and this is so I don't know how many people are stepping into the job market, but you need to have a convincing story. It's the same concept here, right? Here's where I came from. Here's some of the hardships maybe I had, and here's how I overcame, and here's where I'm at now, right? It's the same mentality, right? You need to convince someone that you're worth investing in because you're an achiever, you're an overcomer, you're a person who solves problems, right? That's essentially what you're doing when it comes to stepping into the job market, right? I have my story down because I have to introduce myself to a lot of people, and they're always looking for my credentials. So I've, if I'm being perfectly honest, I have put together a post-it note of, oh, don't forget to talk about this experience and this hardship you overcame and how, and this, right? So I've had to work off bullet points, just like, when we were talking about a pitch, sometimes it's good to work off a bullet point. But because I've had to do this so many times, I've just put that information into my memory, and it stays there, right? But yeah, it's any kind of pitch, Alice. It's going to be very similar to what I just hopefully was here to convey to you. You're going to want to try to get them emotionally connected to you, right? And one other way also of perhaps pitching yourself in a business situation is make sure that you're curious as well, right? Don't neglect. Don't just just talk about yourself, right? There's a famous book out there. What is it? It's like how to make friends and influence people, right? If you read that book, and even in the first couple of chapters, you'll find that it's about listening to people and asking them questions, making people feel like you're interested in them, right? And that's the same thing in a business situation or a job offer situation, right? Make sure that you're curious about the company, because you can only show that you have a strategic, design-oriented mind by understanding the problem of the company. Okay. Well, tell us about yourself. Yeah, I mean, so, if I talk about myself, it's, hey there, everyone, I'm Riley Moynes. One of the things that I like to say is, here's where I started from, right? So I started as a film and video production grad. The thing that I wanted to do for the longest time was produce film and video. I sometimes get into an anecdote about some of the film that I enjoyed and what really pushed me into that market. Then I say, listen, I grew a company, a film and video production company, to $300,000 in revenue every year. We worked with great companies from ABC to NBC to CBC to big companies like Dow, DuPont, etc. And we worked with people like Mark McMorris. But at the end of the day, I was getting, overburdened by the business aspects, and it was killing off my creativity. So I thought, well, why not just take these skills and put them to use from a business perspective. So I went down to San Francisco and I did this really creative, brand new program called the MBA Design Strategy, where I learned how to build innovative products, services, and apps by appreciating the lean methodology and customer user experience design, and then wrapping that in a business strategy, right? And then I moved out to Hamilton, where I thought, well, what better way to take my entrepreneurial experience and pair that with my educational experience to help startup companies. And so since then, I've worked at the Innovation Factory, I've worked at the Forge, and here's, and then you would add something about here's what my next big thing is, and actually I'm looking to get into product management. So let me tell you what I think where I think I can fit into that category and why this interests me, right? So that's kind of a rough pitch regarding myself, but ultimately apply the same principles that I taught you here.
That was a good
Any other
question.
questions?
I just want to squeeze in like one more question.
Sure.
I'm not seeing anything from participants. So one question I had was, what if your idea is not original? For example, you talked about Google as a search engine, but there's like so many others like Firefox, I don't know, Microsoft Edge, Safari. But how do you pitch it when your thing is not original, but it still stands out that you get validation somehow?
So here's the thing. When it comes to originality, that, I think what people do is they think a little bit too broad, right? Yeah, it's a search engine. Google is a search engine. That's just top line what it does. But what about other specific aspects of it, right? People use different search engines differently. I would say a Firefox is kind of a more friendly search engine, right? One of the user experience problems with using like a Chrome, for example, or using, I guess I'm getting into web browsers, but there's privacy issues, right? There's little things that irk people from a user experience standpoint when they're using that, in this case, search engine. So it's very okay to use an existing product as a starting point. And what you do as a designer, UX researcher, or innovator, entrepreneur, is you go and you say, well, what is wrong with this from a user experience standpoint? By the way, I've got a whole nother session I teach on this, but what is wrong with the felt marker? Well, the end wears down, it gets nubby, it gets, it runs out of ink, it dries out, right? How do I build, I can build another type of felt marker, but it'll have different characteristics and it'll solve a user experience problem, right? And so, I think you're thinking too much about category versus, what is the actual value proposition that helps elevate us over the competition, right? That's the important part, is to figure out from a user experience standpoint, where's the problem? What do we absolutely need to do better than the competition? And how do we express that from a marketing standpoint? But yeah, I mean, ultimately the people ask me, Riley, well, what's the starting point for a really great value, for a really great idea? And I say, it's a very potent problem. And it can be a problem that doesn't have a solution yet, but it could be a problem that someone's worked on a solution for and it's just not quite right. And you come in and you do it better. And that's how, just think about it, right? Amazon, they're a bookstore. They were a bookstore way back in the day, right? There's a whole bunch of other bookstores but that didn't prevent Amazon from saying, hey, books, we want to sell them, but we want to do it better. And so what they did was they talked to customers at bookstores and they said, hey, bookstore customers, what's the problem with buying books at a store? And they said, well, oftentimes I don't have that much time to go and go to these stores. They're crowded. There's, they don't often have all the books that I'm interested in, right? And so Jeff Bezos did before he started a rocket company was he developed a solution to that very specific problem. But he did it in a way that started off with selling books and probably a subset of books before he got into selling, products that we, diapers and consumable products that we use every day, and then eventually expanding to do everything. But he started with something super niche and specific. And by the way, it was in a market that was already existing, right?
Right. Yes. I guess it all comes down to like, what is your edge, even if it's like pretty similar.
It's going to come down to,
Mhm.
absolutely, it's going to come down to your edge, but it's going to come down to what user experience problem are people desperately trying to solve that they're willing to spend money to solve, right? That's it. And often products, services, whatever, they have these deep-seated user experience problems. And that's why I said, if you're building a product or service, you're never done researching, right? Because your competitors are researching to try to figure out what you've done wrong, and they're trying to make their product solve those problems. So you, in order to stay on top in the competition, you have to continue researching as well and fixing the problems that you've created in your own products in the design of them.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yes. I think we've
Awesome.
just reached our time, so
Perfect.
I think we should probably end this session. But thank you again for such an amazing presentation and a really helpful Q&A session.
All good. No worries. And thanks for having us. Thanks for having the Forge. I just put my email address in the chat there. And if anybody's interested in our Startup Survivor program, I'm just going to grab the link for that as well. You're going to want to sign up pretty quick here because the deadline is coming up. And let me just get it for you. Startup Survivor, here it is. Deadline. Eligibility forms need to be returned in 4 days by March 4th. So keep that in mind, okay? Here's the link. We've got 75 grand we're giving away, okay? So that's not a small amount of money. You gotta get involved in that, okay? Especially if you're innovators. Cool. Thanks again for having me. Have a great rest of your day and hackathon.
You too.
Bye-bye.